This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome. You've heard and read the spin the media and the politicians have put on the issues of the day. To get the correct spin on what's going on in North Carolina, let us introduce you to our panel of experts. They include former Supreme Court Justice Bob Orr, syndicated columnist John Hood, Chris Fitzsimon from the NC Policy Watch, and former Lieutenant Governor Dennis Wicker. Well, this week we've got an interesting discussion about a new lawsuit involving UNC athletics that could have nationwide significance. We'll talk about whether the judge is going to toss out the voter ID requirement, and we're going to talk about the State of the State speech the governor made this week. Let's get started. The UNC athletics scandal has spawned another lawsuit, this one by two former athletes suing for monetary damages caused by the fake classes. This lawsuit includes UNC Chapel Hill as well as the NCAA, saying the fraud is part of the big-time money machine of college athletics and that the meaningful education being promised these athletes is nothing more than a sham. Bob Orr, you're co-counsel for the former athletes in this suit. Tell us what you hope to accomplish by it.
Well, the primary broad objective is to bring about reform and accountability for the NCAA and its member institutions like UNC in the realm of education provided to these young men and women that are investing their time and talent on the athletic fields to make literally hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars for the NCAA and college athletics. And we've seen, unfortunately, at UNC and around the country that this promise of we're going to give you a college education isn't being met either in part or in whole in many circumstances. So broad reform and accountability is what I'd say the objective is.
It looks to me like, Dennis, we're getting ready to open up Pandora's box here. If we start delving into this, they're the big fish there. There are colleges and universities all across the country that have had these fake classes. Isn't the burden of proof, though, going to be on the students from the standpoint of proving that they had fake classes? I mean, how's all this going to work if the NCAA is going to get involved in it?
Going to be some mighty interesting depositions taken in this case. You know, I think you've hit the nail on the head, Tom, and I think that we are going to be seeing and hearing a lot about the seamy side of this kind of business in our college athletics. And you know, it really brings back the words of Dr. Bill Friday when he said that this was one day going to haunt us. The real point of a student going to a university like UNC or any university in the country is to get an education, not to make money for that university or to play athletics. And I think until we get that point and get that point well, we're going to see a lot of this going on.
But John, this thing talks about the fact that the athletes, they want the athletes to have a comparable education to other students that are going to the universities. Now, I mean, let's look at that on the face of it. The athlete has 30 to 40 hours a week worth of practice, travel, games. They are working out. They are eating at different places. I mean, how do you go about judging a comparable education when the athlete has such demands placed on him?
Well, I think that's a fair question. I think that also some of the students admitted to play sports are not capable of performing at a university level. Let's just face it. And so I just for the sake of argument, even though I know Bob's got all of his ducks in a row on this, I completely agree that there is fake education going on, but the students bear some responsibility for it too. I mean, surely some of them understand when they had a fake class where somebody else was essentially doing their paper for them and they had no lectures and they didn't have to take an exam of any consequence. Surely some of them probably realized they were participating in a fraud. They weren't just being victimized by the university, which I stipulate that there is a victimization, but the students also bear some responsibility.
Speak to that, Bob. I think that's a good point.
Well, without question, there are student responsibilities that each of the athletes has. But in the UNC situation, you're talking about courses that apparently the the institution, the leadership, the academic leadership says, well, gosh, we didn't know there was anything wrong with these courses. So I don't know how you put that burden on a 19-year-old who's being told by counselors or
But
people
the public doesn't believe that either, Bob.
that they don't believe that
the people in the university system didn't know it was going on.
Well, that may come out.
I mean, I think, I don't know what obviously the details of the lawsuit or whether or not it'll be successful. I think it's good that it's been filed. I do think it's time we opened up Pandora's box, and if Bob Orr wants to be opening the box, well, good for him. And I'm glad he's doing it. And there's, you know, for example, here's one thing that's legal in the NCAA. We have teams, University of Kentucky, for example, probably 8 of those players that are freshmen at the University of Kentucky are not going to be there next year. Everybody knows they're going to the NBA. So they're eligible for one semester, the fall semester, where they have to meet certain requirements to play. They don't have, none of them have any reason at all in the world to go to class the second semester of their freshman year because they're all going to the NBA next year. They're professional athletes playing for half a year on a campus, and everybody says, well, that's fine because that's part of the legal of the system. The system itself is the problem. UNC has problems too, but it's the system itself. It's set up to do this.
UNC's response is to hire another $1 million public relations firm. I mean, Bob, they just haven't come candid on this, have they?
Well, I think they don't want to admit that the university was complicit, and I would submit the NCAA was complicit in understanding what was going on, not just at UNC, but all across the country. They supposedly have 20 investigations going on at universities around the country. There's even an academic scandal at Dartmouth involving the football players. As Chris says, the system is fundamentally broken. The so-called college model is totally unreal. They are not students first.
What is this world coming to? Dartmouth? Academic scandals?
Yes.
No surprise, huh? If you like NC Spin and you want more, be sure to visit our website, ncspin.com, or NC Spin on Facebook. We have exclusive video footage you can't get anywhere else. Plus, you can read perspectives from opinion leaders across the state. Get more balanced debate from the Old North State on ncspin.com or NC Spin on Facebook. When we come back, we're going to talk about another lawsuit on voter ID.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
Phones are getting smarter, cars more efficient, TVs bigger and more stunning. Imagine the same innovation from agriculture. Meet the Plant Sciences Initiative at NC State, a proposed state-of-the-art research complex where world-class researchers will tackle agriculture's toughest challenges, like feeding the world's rapidly growing population while preserving natural resources for future generations. Join Farm Bureau and NC State in moving North Carolina to the forefront of ag research in the world. Visit keepaggrowing.org.
Every year, North Carolina patients undergo 635,000 same-day surgeries. 72% of these surgeries are performed in our highest-cost hospital facilities, adding as much as $2,000 to every procedure. The state's outdated Certificate of Need law prevents competition from lower-cost, higher-quality same-day surgery centers, inflating healthcare costs and limiting patient choice. Tell state lawmakers it's time to lower healthcare costs now. It's time to make a simple fix to an outdated law, increasing patient choice and lowering healthcare costs now. You can help. Visit reformconnow.com and tell lawmakers it's time for a simple fix to an outdated law. It's time to lower healthcare costs now.
How will North Carolina compete in a future where everything is accelerated? Join state leaders February 9th and 10th at the Raleigh Convention Center for the 30th Annual Emerging Issues Forum. Explore how innovators are thriving and how North Carolina can keep pace. Register now at emergingissues.org.
CCANC is an organization that really tries to help everybody enjoy their moments fishing. They try to help create awareness. They also work on trying to protect our resources so that it'll be there for our children as well.
I think another consistent theme that we all have is we want to leave the resource in better shape than we found it.
You know, CCA do so many different things, be it a habitat project, restoring oysters, maybe working for good conservation and good management, going fishing and sharing a passion for a healthy resource.
There's plenty of fish for everybody. There's fish for the commercial guys, there's fish for recreational guys. if it's managed in an effective and scientific way.
We have that world record style fishery here, but we've got to make science-based management the future of our fisheries management policies, and then we'll be moving forward, and our legislature needs to know that.
Become a member today at ccanc.org/join.
We now return to NC Spin.
Opponents of North Carolina's voter ID law appeared before a Wake County judge and asked that the provision be dismissed on the grounds that it changes the qualifications for voting and is prohibited by the Constitution. Attorneys for the state counter the argument by saying the 2013 law is only an extension of the voting process and that the legislature is authorized to make such changes. Judge Mike Morgan says he's going to make his decision known in a couple of weeks. John, Morgan's decision could determine whether or not we have this big, long-anticipated hearing this summer. But isn't it fairly well acknowledged that whichever way he rules, the verdict is going to be appealed?
Of course. I mean, these kinds of issues are almost certainly going to be appealed and litigated at higher levels, and there are many different issues. But I think, according to the attorneys that I asked about this, they do believe you have your finger on this critical question with regard to voting with the voter ID. Is this a separate qualification to vote, which is a problem, or is it simply a means of establishing, proving the qualification that you already meet, which is that you are a legal citizen, legal voter? I think that the courts, based upon precedent elsewhere, will decide that requiring a photo ID is a means of proving your identification. It is not a separate qualification to vote, but we'll see.
Well, okay, so the Constitution, Article 6 of the Constitution, right, a little book that you gave me once, right here, yeah, right, once upon a time, says, number one, you got to be 18 years of age or older. You got to have lived in North Carolina for a year or more, and in the precinct in which you vote 30 days or more, can't be a convicted felon, then you're eligible to vote. Now, it goes on to say the General Assembly shall enact general laws governing the registration of voters. Now, the question is it an extension of the process, or does it change qualifications?
Well, you know, you look at some precedent and things like that. In Arkansas, they have almost verbatim the same language we do in our Constitution, and they had a law very similar to the voter ID law we passed in North Carolina, if not the same, and they struck it down. There's a long line of cases, with all due deference to Justice Orr, in North Carolina, where it says the General Assembly is not authorized to add requirements to the constitutional provision, that is, age, felon, those kinds of things. The legal arguments are going to be interesting, Tom, but I'll tell you this: on the political argument side, you cannot oppose this law in terms of the political argument. I mean, people think you ought to be able to show a voter ID when you vote, the vast majority of people.
Well, the supporters of this thing, Chris, say that, okay, you don't have to have a voter ID, just vote by absentee ballot. Doesn't that trouble you a little bit more?
It does. Well, it does. And, you know, well, the political side of it and the actual practical effect, the more cases of voter fraud is easier with absentee ballots. That's why I think people were surprised at adding more restrictions to voting and voter ID without toughening up the absentee ballots enough was done by this General Assembly. There's a ton about this on the political side that I find troubling, and the policy side. The question is, the constitutional provisions you just read, how the judge interprets those. What does registration mean? Does it just mean signing up to vote? Does it
all right, you were sitting on the bench
process?
For a lot of these kinds of issues, Bob. What are you looking at in this case? What are the issues that you're going to try?
Well, you're going to look at the language of the statute that requires the voter ID and see if it is interpreted in a way that it adds a qualification in order to vote, or is it an aspect of proving to the precinct official that you are in fact the registered voter that you're saying you are.
So you're having to make this decision. How are you going to come down on it?
Well, I haven't read the statute in a good while, so I will defer judgment. But I think that's the...
Wait a minute, you've never passed the buck on me before. What is this?
Well, no, truthfully, I think it goes to a very nuanced reading of the statute. And I think the court has, you know, a certain degree of play in saying that, well, the language doesn't impose a new qualification.
So if the courts look to Arkansas, they will strike it down.
All right, so if they strike it down, hearings off this summer, Is that the end of it? We're going to see more legislation? What's going to happen?
I think the other side will appeal.
Right. It's going up. It was motions on the pleading, so both sides are saying there's really no issues of fact here. It's just a question of law. Let's move it on.
All right. After these messages, we're going to come back and ask our panel to analyze the State of the State speech.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
The cost of everything has gone up dramatically over the last 75 years. With one exception, keeping electricity affordable. That's the power of your co-op membership. Learn more at togetherwesave.com.
North Carolina's Touchstone Energy Cooperatives, looking out for you.
Medicaid system is not a perfect system. There are things that could be changed, but there's a lot that's going well with the system. Community Care of North Carolina is in place. It's a team of nurses, advisors, caregivers who help us out. We want to call and say, look, I've got Miss So-and-so here. She needs to have her weight checked each day because she's got congestive heart failure. Can you send one of those monitors out to the house and keep an eye on this and let me know if her weight goes up too much, because if it does, she's retaining fluid and she's going to be back in the hospital. We work together with them. That's a great system. It saves a lot of money. It's proven to work. We're not opposed to changing the things that need to be changed, but let's not throw out everything that we worked for the past 15 to 20 years.
North Carolina's Family Physicians supports Medicaid reform that builds on our state's foundation of medical homes. OurNCHealthcare.com.
Where do you go when you need to know? ANC makes it easy for you to get the information you need to make well-informed public policy decisions. Our members are industry leaders who are ready to share their industry-specific insights with you. Want to hear both sides of the story? ANC members can tell you. Just use the ANC member directory as your guide or call us directly. ANC members have the knowledge, expertise, and perspective you need to create public policies that are good for North Carolina. We are ready for your call.
Does your North Carolina business or organization have a story to tell? I'm Richard Campbell, and at Carolina Broadcasting and Publishing, we help tell stories that connect you to the people who will respond. We take the time to understand our clients' needs and what makes them unique. We craft their stories through the efficient use of words, images, and videos that resonate with their desired audience. We also know that a good story is incomplete without a call to action. On video, on air, online, and in print, from concept to final production, no one can help tell your story more effectively or affordably than we can. For special introductory offers, visit carolinabroadcasting.com or call 919-832-1416. Again, that's carolinabroadcasting.com. Let us help tell your story today.
We now return to NC Spin.
On Wednesday night, Governor Pat McCrory went before a joint session of the legislature, the House and the Senate, and for an hour and 20 minutes gave his State of the State speech. We want to ask our panel to give you their responses and reactions to what he said. Chris, we'll start with you.
Well, I don't think there was a lot of surprises. I think the speech will be remembered for being one of the longer State of the State speeches in recent memory. I think the fact that the Governor McCrory wants to create 2 new state cabinet agencies, information technology and military affairs, and that he proposed 2 bond issues, which one for highways, one for infrastructure, which could cost $2.5 billion. And I also thought it was interesting that he sort of obliquely referred to he might be coming forward with a plan to expand Medicaid, a North Carolina plan, not a Washington plan. So no, I think the amount of the bond might have been a surprise and the length, but overall I didn't think it was there wasn't anything shocking in there.
Dennis, your reaction?
I sort of fell asleep about halfway through it, but actually I think, Tom, what Chris said is true. I think the expansive mode of government was what struck me. I mean, 2 additional cabinets, the bonds. Really, I think he's talking to a fairly conservative group of folks, and to get some of that stuff done is going to take some real hard work on his part. I will say again, and as I said on this show earlier, I don't think you can get the bonds passed without a vote of the people.
Bob Orr, your reactions?
Well, we have a growing state population's increasing. I think Speaker Moore at one point said we need to show that we can govern. I think the governor, with these bond proposals, the cabinet expansions, was trying to convey the impression that we are going to govern, that we are going to try and look after the needs and challenges that the state faces going forward.
John, your reaction?
Tom, I think the most effective part of the speech came early when he talked about the job growth that has happened since he became governor, the paying off of the $2.5 billion of debt to the federal government for unemployment insurance payments. Those were things where he is telling a narrative, crafting a message for his reelection bid, which is not that far away, saying the policies that you, the legislature, and I as governor put into place are starting to work. I think that was the most important part of the speech politically.
Dennis, if I had not been paying close attention, I would have thought this was a Democrat standing up there, because I heard about expansion in state government. You alluded to it a few minutes ago. How's that going to play with this legislature?
I really think it's going to be difficult, but as I mentioned, because of the bonds. I don't think this legislature is going to pass bonds without some vote of the people, and I think there's going to be some other things attached to it. On the cabinets, there might be some merit to some of that, but again, that's a lot of money.
Well, let's talk about this bond issue for a second. A case has been made, and there's been a build-up to this. We all expected transportation bonds. The $1 billion worth of public infrastructure is another matter altogether. How hard is that going to be to sell, John?
Well, it depends on the details of the package, but if we're talking about a lot of money spent disproportionately in a few places, like the state capitol and maybe a few other locations where there are high percentages of the workforce are working for state government, I think that's a much harder sell than the highway bond would be.
All right, so how did McCrory handle himself, and where does this leave him?
Well, I think John mentioned his reelection bid, or his reelection effort, and he talked about his accomplishments, which I have some quibbles with, of course, but I think the goal was to sound not like a Democrat, but not like a legislature that started this session trying to figure out how to keep gay people from getting married and talking about abortion rules. He wants to come out of this session people thinking of him more like the mayor of Charlotte than the person who's run North Carolina for 2 years.
He certainly was very personable and very animated. I think he recognized half the world during the course of his speech, and it sounded more like a presidential kind of State of the Union remark, did it not?
Well, of course it did. There's always going to be a certain amount of pageantry to these kinds of events. But I think he's talking about investing in North Carolina, and he's hoping that's the message people hear.
All right, after these messages, we're going to ask the panel to tell us something we don't know.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
Hi, I'm Linda Loveland. I want the best for my kids. Feeding them foods they like within my budget is a priority. But what do we really know about these foods? North Carolina farmers and food experts give you a website to find it all. FeedTheDialogueNC.com, a place where moms like you and me can learn more about the foods we eat and the farmers that feed us. Check it out. Add your input and help feed the dialogue. Let's talk food at FeedTheDialogueNC.com.
Nobody ever imagined a mammogram machine being subject to CON law. If I want to invest our business dollars into technology that I think is going to benefit my patients, my customers, we should be able to do that. I think it's time to take a law that was intended to protect the citizens of North Carolina and now is harming them and change it. I'm Dr. Bruce Schroeder, and I support CON reform.
Visit reformconnow.com.
How will North Carolina compete in a future where everything is accelerated? Join state leaders February 9th and 10th at the Raleigh Convention Center for the 30th Annual Emerging Issues Forum. Explore how innovators are thriving and how North Carolina can keep pace. Register now at emergingissues.org.
Medicaid system is not a perfect system. There are things that could be changed, but there's a lot that's going well with the system. Community Care of North Carolina is in place. It's a team of nurses, advisors, caregivers who help us out. We want to call and say, look, I've got Miss So-and-so here. She needs to have her weight checked each day because she's got congestive heart failure. Can you send one of those monitors out to the house and keep an eye on this and let me know if her weight goes up too much, because if it does, she's retaining fluid and she's going to be back in the hospital. We work together with them. That's a great system. It saves a lot of money has proven to work. We're not opposed to changing the things that need to be changed, but let's not throw out everything that we worked for the past 15 to 20 years.
North Carolina's Family Physicians supports Medicaid reform that builds on our state's foundation of medical homes. OurNCHealthcare.com.
Now here's the part of the show we all enjoy. We're going to ask the panel to tell us something we don't know. Chris Fitzsimon, we'll start with you.
A bill was filed in the State House already for the Board of Governors elections. Normally that's sort of under the radar and people don't pay that much attention. I think with the dismissal of Tom Ross coming in, he's got one more year. It's going to be very closely watched. Nominations are already in. The House wants to have everything done by March 18th. The Senate will be doing it soon. This will be a very closely watched Board of Governors election.
Dennis, tell us something we don't know.
An obscure report came out that said over half our kids are below poverty of income in our public schools. That was debated, came back with maybe some data that wasn't right. Let me tell you a factoid that is right. 56% of our kids are on free lunch in our schools, and per pupil funding is going down. It's a disaster in the making.
Bob Orr, tell us something we don't know.
The governor's separation of powers lawsuit involving the Coal Ash Commission and other commissions is on a judicial rocket sled. There is a hearing scheduled in March before the 3-judge panel. We're going to get a decision very quickly in that.
Interesting. John, tell us something we don't know.
The John Locke Foundation, of which I'm chairman, has just celebrated its 25th anniversary. The coveted James K. Polk Award, which I believe Bob Orr won at one point. Yes. This year went to Virginia Fox, the current Congresswoman and former state legislator.
Interesting. All right, so we've set the stage now for the 2016 elections. The governor's made the State of the State speech. The legislature is going to work quickly. Any big surprises you see coming up in the next week or 2, 3, coming out of the legislature?
That is way too much to ask.
Yeah. Way too much.
Pretty predictable over there right now.
Right now. Chris?
I don't think so. I mean, one big thing will be how soon the General Assembly gets past the social issues. I mean, that sort of dominated the first week of the session, the coverage, and that's the last thing I think Governor McCrory and probably Speaker Moore wants. But Senator Berger's talking a lot about things that aren't on the mainstream agenda. I think you'll see that shift pretty quickly.
So they're just settling down now. They're getting into the business, and
I think the big news will break in March.
All right. Well, you've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To be sure to visit our website, ncspin.com, and NCSpin on Facebook for more debate all week long. Next week, our show's devoted entirely to education with a special panel that was recorded at the Public School Forum's Eggs and Issues event. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
Join us next week and get the spin on issues facing our state.